Snow carved sideways through the dark, screaming like banshees torn from the earth. A man, little more than a shadow swallowed by the blizzard, trudged against it, one boot forward, then the other, each step an act of defiance. His name was Caleb Rourke, though the wind didn't care and neither did the land. His horse, a battered Appaloosa named Mercy, stumbled and collapsed beneath him, legs folding gracelessly in the drifts. Caleb dropped to his knees beside her, pressing a hand to her neck. The pulse was shallow. She blinked at him once before the whites of her eyes rolled away. He didn't weep. Not anymore. The world had taught him too well. The wind peeled across his face as he rose. His hands, wrapped in cracked leather, trembled from cold and more than cold. The rifle on his back was iced over. He didn't reach for it. There was no fight to be had here, only the slow war of endurance. Somewhere in this white hell, tucked deep beyond the trees and across a frozen creek, was a cabin. Not a promise, just a rumor, passed on by a dying trapper whose skin had turned black from frostbite. That was yesterday. Now Caleb walked through a killing storm toward a half-remembered tale and a place he didn't even know was real. His breath came out in jagged clouds. His beard was rimed with ice. The world had shrunk to the 5 feet ahead of him, and still he pressed on, driven by something raw and unfinished in his chest. He wasn't running from the cold. He was running from memory. The first time he held his daughter, she had fingers like spider silk, tiny nails. His wife had whispered her name, Claire, and smiled like the world might still be kind. That was before the fever, before the war took everything it missed the first time. Claire had lasted longer than they thought. 5 years. Caleb remembered her coughing, a sound like paper tearing. She died on a Wednesday. No doctor came. The town had moved on. He dug her grave behind their old house with a spoon because the ground was too hard for the shovel. That was 3 winters ago, but Caleb still carried the spoon in his pack. Now the snow dragged at his knees and whispered to him with her voice. He didn't answer. Through the blizzard, a shape emerged. Logs stacked low, a sagging roof hunched beneath the weight of snow. One shutter flapped like a broken wing. Smoke curled faintly from a crooked chimney. Real. Tangible. His knees buckled. He tasted blood. With a grunt, he crawled the last few feet to the porch and slammed a fist against the door. No answer. He hesitated. Something about the silence behind that door wasn't just emptiness. It was tension, stretched tight. But he was past caution. The wind had stripped it from him. He turned the knob. It wasn't locked. The heat struck him like a blow, thick and choking after the cold. The door creaked open fully. He staggered in and froze. The first thing he saw was the stove, cast iron, burning hot. A kettle steamed atop it. The second thing he saw was her. A woman, barefoot, pregnant, chained by the ankle to the stove. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. Her hands trembled. She pressed herself against the far wall, mouth open in a silent scream. "Don't," she whispered. Caleb raised both hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't move. The chain around her ankle clinked softly. He noticed the rawness of her skin beneath it. Red, scabbed. The iron collar had been there a long time. "Who are you?" she demanded. He knelt slowly, hands still in the air. "Just a man looking not to die in a blizzard." "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. Her voice was thick, like she hadn't spoken in days. "He'll come back." "Who?" Her lip trembled. She looked toward the door as if afraid it might open at any second. "Jarrett." Caleb felt his spine go rigid. "This Jarrett did that to you?" She didn't nod. She didn't need to. The chain rattled as she adjusted, inching toward the stove for warmth, her belly round and taut under a threadbare dress. She must have been 7 or 8 months along. Caleb scanned the room. A rifle hung over the hearth, too high for her to reach. 2 chairs, a table, no second bed. 1 plate on the floor, licked clean. "How long have you been here?" 2. Long. "I can break the chain," he said. "No," she said sharply. "If he comes back and sees it broken." Caleb exhaled slowly. He hadn't come looking for this. A warm fire, maybe shelter for the night, a place to be forgotten. Not a prisoner, not a woman held captive in the middle of nowhere. "Your name?" he asked. "Etta. You alone?" She looked at him hard. "Not anymore." A gust shook the cabin. Snow dusted through a crack in the doorframe. Caleb stepped back, closed it tight, and bolted it. The sound made Etta flinch. He took off his coat, revealing the faded blue of a Union uniform underneath. Her eye caught it. For a moment, a glimmer of recognition, or contempt, lit her face. "You were a soldier. Long time ago." She eyed his hands, the scars on his knuckles. "Still looks like you fight." He didn't answer. He moved toward the stove, sat across from her, and held out his hands to the fire. For a long time, they didn't speak. Etta's breath slowed. Her muscles began to relax slightly, but her hand still hovered near the chain like she expected to be yanked back at any second. "You hungry?" Caleb asked. She nodded. He dug into his satchel. Dry jerky, 2 tins of beans, and a chunk of salt pork. He handed her the beans and broke the top with a knife. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't look at her. "Don't thank me yet." She ate quickly, like someone who'd had food withheld more than once. Caleb stared at the fire, shadows dancing over his hollow face. "I didn't think anyone was coming," she said quietly. "I wasn't." Silence again. The wind screamed against the cabin walls, then softly, "You gonna leave?" He looked over, really seeing her now. Pale, bruised, a flicker of defiance in her gaze despite everything. "I don't know," he said. She nodded. She didn't cry. Caleb lay back against the wall and closed his eyes. He didn't sleep, but let his body soften. Let the pain in his limbs settle into something dull and constant. But he could still feel her watching him. After some time, her voice came again, barely more than a breath. "If he comes back, and you're still here, he'll kill you." Caleb opened his eyes. "I've been killed before." "You don't understand," she said. "He's not like most men." "You saying he's worse?" She looked down at the chain around her ankle. "Yes." The wind shrieked louder, but inside the cabin it was still. Caleb's gaze drifted to the iron links, the burns on her skin, the way she wrapped her arms around her stomach like it was the only thing left worth protecting. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether Jarrett Boone was a man or a monster, whether he'd stay the night or disappear at first light. But something had already changed. Caleb Rourke had come to this place expecting to die. Instead, he'd found someone who still had something to live for, and that meant he had a choice to make. He reached into his coat and pulled out the spoon, turned it over in his hand, stared at the curve of it as if it might hold some forgotten truth. Etta watched, puzzled. Caleb set it down beside the fire, beside her. Then he leaned his head back and let the storm howl. He didn't say another word, but he didn't leave either. The night dragged long and heavy, broken only by the rhythmic snap of the fire and the wind's teeth scraping against the wooden walls. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat with his back to the cabin wall, knees drawn up, rifle cradled like a child in his lap. His eyes stayed on Etta. She'd curled into herself by the stove, one hand resting protectively on the mound of her stomach, the other near the chain that tethered her like a dog. Even in sleep, if she slept, her fingers brushed against the iron, as though touching it made it more bearable, as though she couldn't risk forgetting it was there. Morning didn't come so much as seep into the cabin, gray light through frost-rimmed windows, half swallowed by the storm still growling. Beyond the walls, Caleb stretched slowly, wincing at the ache in his limbs. His legs had stiffened and his fingers felt wooden. The warmth from the stove hadn't reached his corner. He'd let it be hers. Etta stirred as he stood. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, then snapped awake with the speed of someone trained by fear. Her hand flew to her ankle. "You're still here," she said. "I am." She sat up, adjusting her dress across her knees. The chain rattled with a sound Caleb was starting to hate. You didn't try to leave? Storm's still chewing out. There, he said. I've got no reason to freeze to death just yet. She narrowed her eyes slightly, suspicious. That's the only reason? Caleb didn't answer. He turned toward the counter and rummaged for a pan. The shelves were bare, save for a cracked bottle of molasses and some oats in a rusted tin. He cooked the oats over the stove, scooping out 2 bowls with a ladle that looked like it had survived a war of its own. She waited for him to bring it closer. He did, kneeling just outside the range of the chain. She reached, careful not to show pain, but her hiss as the shackle tugged against her skin gave her away. You need that off, Caleb said, voice low. No. You're bleeding. I said no. Her voice turned sharp. He checks. Every time. Caleb's jaw worked quietly, but he said nothing more. He sat across from her again and ate in silence. The porridge was bland and dry but warm. How far's the nearest town? He asked after a while. Fort Benton, she said. 3 days if you know the trails. Longer in snow. He bring you from there? She shook her head. Further, east. Didn't see much. Was in a wagon most of the time, then the dark. He kept me blindfolded. Said it made things easier. Said I'd understand eventually. Caleb stared at the floor. You try to run? Once, she said. Her voice dropped. Didn't get far. He broke my collarbone. Dragged me back here. Told me next time he'd chain me by the neck. She finished her porridge, wiping the edge of the bowl clean with her thumb. There was no shame in her voice, just a calm recounting, like a story. She'd repeated to herself too many times to keep feeling it. What do you think he wants? Caleb asked. I'm carrying his legacy, she muttered bitterly. That's what he says. Not just a child, but a kingdom reborn. His words, not mine. You believe him? She looked up, her one good eye fixing on Caleb. I think. Jarrett Boone doesn't want a wife or a family. He wants ownership, and he thinks blood means loyalty. Caleb leaned back, mind ticking. Boone. The name tugged at something buried deep. It had weight to it, a kind of infamy whispered over campfires and in saloons where the war still lingered behind men's eyes. Ex-Confederate officer, turned bounty hunter, turned outlaw. Some said he'd carved his own territory in the northern wilds, beyond reach of law. Others said he was dead, apparently not. Caleb ran a thumb across his jaw, scraping over the old scar near his ear. He remembered stories of Boone from the tail end of the war, ambushes in Tennessee, massacres disguised as raids, a red scarf tied to his belt soaked in Union blood. The man had been a ghost and a legend, and now he was real, and coming back. Why? Now? Caleb asked. Why bring someone out here and trap them in a place like this? Because no one would come looking, Etta said. Because I'm a nobody, or was, before him. There was no self-pity in her voice. That's what made it worse. She'd accepted her invisibility as fact, like snow was white or the sky was cold. Caleb stood again, stretching stiff legs. He paced the cabin, looking for supplies, weapons, anything useful. Boone's rifle still hung over the hearth, a brutal thing, long-barreled and well-oiled. A box of ammunition sat beside it, untouched. Caleb slid the box into his coat without asking. You trust me yet? He asked. No, she said. But you haven't tried to kill me, and that's something. Suppose that's a start. He moved to the window and peeled back the curtain. Outside, snow still fell, but slower now, drifting rather than slashing. Shadows in the trees seemed to breathe. He stared longer than necessary, watching the tree line. He didn't say what he saw. Just beyond the creek, in the thicket, fresh tracks marred the snow. Not animal, booted. Recent. 2 pairs. Heavy steps, careful but present, watching. Caleb let the curtain fall and turned back. You expecting visitors? Her face went still. Why? No reason. He moved away from the window and began stacking kindling by the door, quietly, methodically. Etta watched him with the wariness of someone used to sudden violence. You gonna tell me what you saw? Not yet, he said. You think he's out there? I think someone is. She went pale but said nothing more. Her hands drifted, toward her stomach again, fingers curling tight. A tremor ran through her shoulders. Caleb moved to the stove and pulled the kettle off the heat. He poured water into a tin cup and set it beside her. "You got anything for infection? For wounds?" "Cabinet under the bed," she said, pointing. "He keeps some old poultices, tinctures. Don't ask why. He found them. Old roots, dried herbs, something that stung the nose." Caleb sorted through them, familiar with pain, familiar with field medicine in the crude ways soldiers learn when the world gives up doctors. He approached her slowly and knelt. "Let me clean the chain wound," he said. She hesitated. Then, after a long silence, she nodded. He worked carefully, gently, dabbing at the skin with soaked cloth, avoiding her eyes. She gritted her teeth and made no sound, but her fingers dug into the floorboards. "You've done this before," she murmured. "Too many times. For yourself? For others. Mostly dead by the time I finished." He didn't say Claire, didn't say her name even inside his mind. When he finished, he rewrapped the wound with a piece of linen he tore from his shirt. It wasn't much, but it was cleaner than the bloodied rag she'd been using. She looked at it like it was a gift too fine for her. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect? A man who'd see a chained woman and look the other way?" "I've looked away too many times," he said. The wind outside was dying, the storm surrendering. But Caleb felt something colder settle in the room. Not from the air, but from what was coming. He knew Boone would return. The man who chained a woman to a stove didn't leave things unfinished, and when he came, there'd be blood. Still kneeling, Caleb picked up the chain and ran a finger along its links. "I can cut this," he said. "I will when the time's right." Etta said nothing, but her hand found his wrist, just for a moment, light as snowfall. It was the first time she touched him without fear. That night, Caleb moved his bedding closer to the fire. Not beside her, but closer. She watched him with tired eyes, and for the first time, her body didn't flinch at his nearness. When she fell asleep, her breathing evened out, chain slack against the floor. Caleb sat watch beside her. The wind had passed. The world was quieter, but the silence did not mean safety. He closed his eyes briefly, felt the weight of the air, and knew what it meant. The storm outside had ended, but the storm inside the cabin had only just begun. It began with the crows. At first, just one, a rough ink-black shape darting low across the trees. Then more, wheeling in the pale sky, their shrill cries slicing through the forest like splinters of glass. Caleb noticed them before he heard the crunch of boots. He was standing by the window watching the tree line with a hunter's stillness. Etta was seated in the corner, half-shadowed by the stove, shelling dried beans into a tin bowl. The rhythm was calming her, giving her hands something to do besides tremble. Then came the sound that didn't belong. Boots on snow, not the wild stagger of an animal, not the wind brushing through limbs. A man. 2 men. Maybe more. Caleb didn't move. "They're here." Etta froze mid-motion, a bean clattering to the floor. Her breath hitched, caught halfway between her ribs and her throat. "How many?" she asked. 2, maybe 3. But they're smart, keeping their distance for now. She reached instinctively for the chain, not to pull it, just to feel it, as if confirming this was real, not some slow-burn nightmare. Caleb stepped away from the window, his voice low and steady. "You said he always comes alone." "Always. Has before." "Then maybe this time's different." He moved fast now, efficient, with the kind of urgency that didn't panic. He'd learned long ago that death didn't wait for permission. It walked in, took what it pleased, and left the blood to soak where it fell. He loaded Boone's rifle, the long-barreled relic from the mantel, and checked the revolver on his hip. 6 shots. "No more." "What do you want me to do?" Etta asked, eyes wide, body rigid with dread. "You sit still. You breathe. And when I say move, you move. Understand?" She nodded once. Caleb crouched beside the door, the rifle raised, barrel just over the window ledge. Snow fell in lazy spirals now, quiet as ash. The world had taken on that eerie stillness before a blade falls. Then the door creaked. Not a knock. A deliberate push. Just enough to rattle the latch, test its will. Caleb held his breath. A voice followed. Deep, mocking. Southern drawl like syrup poured over rusted nails. Well, hell. You leave a man's door unlocked, he might think he's welcome. Caleb spoke without raising his voice. This isn't your place anymore. Silence. Then laughter. Low, rich, poisoned. Whoever you are, you got the wrong impression. I built this place. I earned what's inside it. You're trespassing. Squatting on land that don't belong to you. She ain't property. No? The voice called. Then what would you call a woman taken from a burned-out town? With no name, belly full of your seed, and too weak to fight back? Caleb's voice dropped to ice. I'd call her a prisoner. Then you're gonna learn what happens to thieves and liars. Another silence. Then movement. A gunshot cracked through the window, shattering glass, a bullet zipping past Caleb's cheek and digging into the wall behind him. Etta screamed and ducked. Caleb dropped flat, rolled to the side, and returned fire. Through the broken pane, he didn't aim for shadows. He aimed for the flash. A second shot rang out, then a third, this time from the trees. 2 shooters, confirmed. 1 bullet tore a chunk from the doorframe. Caleb scrambled to his feet, dragged a heavy dresser in front of the window. Another round slammed into the wood. They're pinning us in, he shouted. Etta had pressed herself against the far wall, her eyes wide with terror but not useless. She crawled toward the bed, grabbed the small pistol Boone had left hidden in the drawer, a rusted Derringer, but her hands were steady. Caleb nodded, impressed despite the chaos. They'll rush us next, he said. Boone's not the patient kind. She looked up at him, voice shaking. If he gets in here, he won't let you die fast. Then we won't let him in. The chain rattled as she rose to her knees. You have to cut it, she said. Now. I can't run, I can't fight, not like this. Caleb hesitated only a moment before pulling a hatchet from his pack. He grabbed a wedge of iron from the stove side and wedged it between the chain and her ankle. Hold still, he muttered. She bit down on a rag and nodded. The hatchet came down, once, twice. On the third strike, the shackle split with a ringing cry, the iron screaming louder than she did. Blood welled beneath the torn skin. Caleb dropped the hatchet and wrapped the wound tight with what was left of his undershirt. Can you walk? Enough. Another gunshot punched through the wall. Splinters flew. Caleb grabbed Etta and helped her to her feet, propping her against the back wall of the cabin. We're not staying here, he said. Smoke them out. Drive them close. Then we run. How? She asked, gasping. He looked at the stove, then at the oil lamp on the table. Fire, he said simply. She understood at once. Her nod was grim. Caleb grabbed the lamp, yanked the top off, and sloshed oil along the front wall, down the curtains, across the threshold. He struck a match. The flames leapt like wolves. Outside, the sudden light drew shouts from the trees. Caleb turned to Etta. Now. She didn't argue. She followed him through the back, where a loose board behind the stove revealed a narrow crawl space beneath the floorboards. Caleb dropped down first, rifle slung across his back, then reached up and helped her after. They crawled beneath the cabin as smoke began to curl through the floor above. The fire spread fast. Within minutes, the whole front wall was a sheet of flame. Boots thundered across the porch. A curse rang out. Then a door was kicked open. Right into a firestorm. Boone roared in anger, fury spitting from his lungs. Where are you, Caleb? Caleb heard it for the first time. His name. Recognition ran through him like an old fever. So he did remember. Boone remembered the boy he'd left for dead at Shiloh, the boy whose regiment he ambushed, the boy who survived. Etta heard it too. Her head snapped toward him. You knew him. I know what he is, Caleb said. From under the cabin they saw boots stomp through the fire, careless, driven. Another set followed. 2 men, one big and plodding, the other lean and fast. Caleb waited. The cabin began to groan as the roof caught. Then quietly, he motioned toward the back, a crawlspace exit. They pushed out into the snow behind the burning cabin. Smoke shielded them. The wind had turned, pushing flame and heat forward. They moved, quick as they could. Etta limping, Caleb half carrying her, through the brush. Toward the frozen creek, a shout went up behind them. There! Gunfire cracked again. Caleb shoved Etta down behind a fallen log and turned. He fired 3 shots, 1 hitting, the other 2 driving them back. Go! He barked. But Etta didn't. Run! She'd drawn her little pistol and aimed it with both hands, breath tight. When Boone's second man came through the smoke, she fired. The shot took him in the chest. He spun backward and didn't rise. Her eyes didn't widen. Her mouth didn't open. She just whispered, "That one was for me." Caleb didn't argue. They ran, through the trees, past the creek, into the brush. Branches tore at them, the cold now secondary to the fire behind them and the men who still chased. But Caleb didn't look back. Not yet. He had 1 bullet left. And a man to kill. Snow smothered the woods in quiet again, the kind of silence that followed violence. The hush after a scream. The stillness after a body drops. Caleb leaned against a tree, chest heaving, a streak of blood across his coat. Not his, not yet. Etta sat at the base of the same trunk, cradling her ankle, her face paler than the frost that curled over the underbrush. Behind them, smoke coiled into the sky where the cabin used to stand, a twisted silhouette of flame and ruin. The blaze had eaten everything Boone built, his shelter, his rules, his control. But not the man. They hadn't seen him fall. That was the problem. "We can't stop long," Caleb said, his voice rough with cold and grit. "He's out. There. Wounded or not." Etta nodded, face tight with pain. "My legs won't carry far. I'll carry you. You won't make it with both of us. You're already bleeding." He looked down at the cut along his ribs. It wasn't deep, but the cold had stiffened his side, and every breath tugged at the wound like a thread coming undone. Still, he crouched in front of her, turning his back. "Climb on," he said. She hesitated, then looped her arms around his neck. He rose slowly, steadying them both. The forest stretched wide and cruel ahead, trees sharp with ice, the trail buried. Every step was a question of will. The cold gnawed through their layers, and branches clawed at their faces like wild hands. But they moved. Always forward. Etta broke the silence first. "Why did he know your name?" Caleb didn't answer for a while. Just the sound of snow under boots and breath in fog. "We were soldiers," he finally said. "Same war, opposite sides. He did something to you?" "He did worse to others. My unit got ambushed in Tennessee. We were outnumbered, outgunned. We surrendered. Boone didn't believe in prisoners." She didn't ask more. The silence said what he couldn't, what had been done, what couldn't be undone. "Did you ever think you'd face him again?" she asked. "No, but I should have." Snow began to lighten. Trees gave way to a clearing, wide and wind-scoured. In the center stood an old trapper's post, half collapsed, roof missing, but 4 walls and a barrel stove still intact. Caleb moved inside, set Etta down gently against the far wall. He gathered what dry wood he could find and got a fire going, the flame weak but enough. Etta leaned back and stared at the rafters above, what was left of them. Her voice came soft. "I thought I'd die there, in that cabin, chained like an animal. I prayed someone would find me, but I didn't think God was listening anymore." "He wasn't," Caleb said. "I was." She smiled, barely. "You're not what I prayed for. I'm not what anybody prays for." He checked the wound on her ankle. The bleeding had slowed, but the skin was raw, angry, deep. She gritted her teeth as he packed it again. "I'll need to leave you here for a few hours," he said. She looked at him sharply. "No. He's still out there. I can't lead him to you. I need to draw him off. Finish it. Then I'm coming with you. You can't run. You can barely stand." She stared at him, jaw set. "Then give me a gun." Caleb hesitated, then handed her the Derringer. 1 shot remained. "You wait. If it's me that comes back, you'll know." She nodded, her grip firm. "Steady." "Caleb?" He turned at the door. "If you don't come back, I will." And then he was gone. The woods swallowed him fast. Snow began to fall again, soft and slow like time had exhaled. Caleb followed. The faint blood trail Boone had left. Drops on bark, a smear along a pine trunk. He was hurt, yes, but not broken. Not yet. The tracks led downhill toward the creek. Boone was circling, trying to lose him, maybe double back to finish what he'd started. Caleb knew the pattern, knew the mind behind it. A predator's patience. Near, a cluster of boulders, the trail vanished. Caleb slowed, rifle raised. His breath came out in clouds, tight and rhythmic. Then, snap a branch. Behind him. He spun, but too late. Boone surged from behind a tree, knife in one hand, pistol in the other. Caleb fired, missed. Then the two men crashed together like freight wagons colliding. They fell into the snow, wrestling, for control. Boone's blade slashed across Caleb's forearm. Caleb struck him with the rifle stock, sending blood flying. "You should have died back then," Boone snarled. "So should you," Caleb hissed. They broke apart, both staggering, to their feet circling like wolves. Boone raised his pistol, but Caleb charged before he could aim, tackling him into the snow again. They rolled down a short embankment, crashing against roots and rock. Boone came up first. "Should have stayed buried, boy," he growled. He leveled the gun. Caleb didn't flinch, and then a shot rang out. Boone's eyes widened. He looked down at his chest, a red bloom spread across his shirt. He fell forward, hard, lifeless. Behind him stood Etta, smoke curling from the Derringer's barrel, hand shaking but eyes unblinking. Caleb stared, breathing hard, covered in blood and snow and disbelief. She lowered the gun slowly. "You said wait." He coughed, out a weak laugh. "You never did listen." She walked toward him, limping badly, every step agony. But she came. "He would have come back," she said. "He had to be stopped." "You stopped him." Together they buried Boone beneath a cairn of stone and ice. No prayers, no markers, just silence. He didn't deserve more. They returned to the trapper's post before dusk, both nearly hollowed out from cold and exhaustion. Caleb stoked the fire. Etta curled close, shoulder to his. They didn't speak much. There was nothing more to say that wouldn't break something delicate. In the morning, the storm had passed for good. Sky wide and endless above them, sun glaring off the snow like polished steel. They packed what little they had. The mountains loomed to the north. Fort Benton lay somewhere beyond. "How far?" she asked. 3 days, he said. "If we're lucky." She looked down at her belly, touched it gently. "We'll need more luck than that." Caleb offered her his hand, not as a hero, not as a savior, just a man who'd seen enough death and wanted to choose something else. She took it. They walked slowly, side by side, into the white expanse. No promises, no futures, just steps. Behind them, the forest held its secrets. Ahead of them waited whatever came next. Freedom, they'd learned, had a price, but so did survival, and they'd paid both in blood.